Hey guys, what's happening? This is Rusty Pruitt, and I've got Maria Lopez with me here. What's up, Maria?
Just hanging out.
Hanging out. Hey, didn't you wear that shirt last podcast episode?
Yeah.
Can you believe this?
You wore that shirt too. I actually was sitting right here also.
It's so bizarre. It's just how that happened. But we are talking about a pretty cool topic today. This is going to be short and sweet, which probably means it's going to run over because we're not organized. We're all over the place, but that's okay. We're going to talk about podcast. Okay, obviously we're hosting this podcast. One of the reasons we're hosting this podcast is because I'm a big podcast listener. It ebbs and flows over the years, like when I'm really into it, when I have time, or maybe sometimes not as much, but I listen to a ton of podcasts. For those of you listening right now, obviously you do as well. So I think it's kind of interesting when you go through someone else's podcast library. We did that. I mentioned the last episode. I was down in Tampa, Florida last week. And I was talking to some guys. We were going through their audiobooks, like the audiobooks they had on Audible or Apple. And they were showing me their books that they had. And I was comparing to the ones I had. And then it turned into, hey, here are the podcasts I listen to. What do you listen to? So I think that's kind of interesting. Maria, have you been a big podcast listener, or I know you're a few generation or two younger than me, so like is this a thing for generation Y, Z, or whatever you guys are?
I think I'm a millennial. Yes. So actually I had never listened to a podcast before working for you or working with you. And the first podcast I ever listened to was Gary V. Huge guy. He's huge into social media marketing, and I loved it. It's hard for me to find the time or be intentional about reading a book. And it's so fun just getting to listen to someone. And so I started listening to episodes in my car. But yeah, you got me started on podcasts. I think that a lot of people my age listen to them. And it's crazy how the year I started listening to podcasts is the year that we created this podcast. So it all moved pretty quickly. But yeah, I have pretty much any free time I have in my car, instead of music, I'll listen to some podcasts.
So I want to get a little bit of background. So just some of my personal upbringing. So my mom, probably one of my biggest heroes, personally, professionally. My mom growing up she was in sales. She was a registered dietitian, went to Auburn University, War Eagle, went to FSU for her master's, and she was a registered dietitian by trade. And she was working in consulting for a medical supply company in South Alabama. And it was a sales position. And so she moved into a sales role. And this when we were young. And I remember she got a company car. We thought that was the coolest thing, by the way, that she had a company car and a company bag phone at the time. So this is way back then. You probably don't know what a bag phone is, do you, Maria?
Is it a phone in your car?
Yeah. Yeah, in a bag, like you plug it to the cigarette lighter.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember when I was young, particularly in the summers, my mom would load my brother and I up, my younger brother. She'd load us up because she didn't have daycare or the YMCA was closed, whatever it was. And she would take us with her to run, in the car to different nursing homes to call on, the administrators for sales. And there was not a single time that she did not have a book on tape, an audio book on tape going, and we had to listen to it. And we were like, Mom, come on, can we listen to the radio? And so she constantly, right? So she had cassettes out, everywhere. It was Dale Carnegie. It was, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Some of the courses I've done in the past, all these different sort of, motivational speakers or personal development things on how to get better with sales or motivation or, leadership, whatever it was. And so my mom was the OG when it came to that stuff, and she was constantly reading. And so one of the reasons she did that, number one, she's a learner. Number two, she had never been in sales before. So the company she went to work for, I'm not sure if they had a formal sales program. I assume not. So she had to self-teach herself. So that's why she was constantly trying to find ways to learn how to sell, to learn time management, to learn all these things. She used to have a Franklin Covey time planner, it was this thick, she had everything mapped out, highly organized. So she learned that through a lot of this personal development. So, my mom is one of my, mentors. I look up to her. She's motivated me, my brothers, and, my brother being a basketball coach, my older brother. And, we've learned a lot of those principles. So I early on learned how important it is. What you put in is what comes out, right? So what goes in is what goes out. And so I learned that early on. Fast forward to college, I was a marketing major. I want to go into medical sales, want to be like mom, right? Everybody and their mom wanted to be in medical sales, pharmaceutical sales, medical device sales when I was graduating. And actually, I had breakfast yesterday with somebody who expressed the same thing, who's a lot younger than me. So I don't think a whole lot has changed necessarily. But that was the thing. Well, I did not have any sales experience. I had no sales experience in college. I did not have the best GPA. I was an A, B, and C kind of student. Couldn't even get interviews with a lot of these companies. And so only way I knew I could get sales experience without having a job was to start reading a lot of these books myself. So I remember my senior year in college, I'm reading these books. I'm going to my mom's, like raiding her bookshelf, getting all these, how to win friends and influence people, the power of selling, you name it. I was reading it, right, to try to learn those sales skills. So that's something that's been ingrained from me from a very early age. Then I started, listening to audiobooks, books on tape, right? Books on CD. Now with our cell phones, we have Apple, we have Spotify, we can listen to audiobooks. So it's so available and so easy. But I'll be honest, I got to a point where I feel like I listened to 20, 30, 40 audiobooks to where it kind of got bored with it, I don't know. I don't know if there's a season of life. I mean, if anyone listening to this has done this, maybe I'm not the only one, but you'll listen to an audiobook, or sometimes I get halfway through and I'm so bored out of my mind, I've just got to put it down. I cannot make myself get through it. Have you experienced that? Have you?
Yeah, no, I feel like with audiobooks, you have more structure, and with podcasting, even if it's just you and you don't have a host or a co-host, it's more conversational. I mean, you're really getting into the mind of the person that you're listening to. And so it's very personal, and it's easier to follow, I guess. And there's some episodes or some podcasts you listen to and you're kind of doing your chores, you're not missing out on
Right.
a lot of the information that they're putting out. So definitely.
For sure. So for me, when I transitioned from the audiobooks, not that I'm listening to one right now, right? For me though, it was a refresher for me to go from that to listen to podcasts. And I'm going to go through different podcasts in my library. I think it's, people may find it interesting, may not, but in no particular order I'll go through. But I remember one of the first ones I got connected with, and I was in real estate, I believe at the time. It's called the Real Estate Guys Radio. So if you Google, if you're interested in real estate, an amazing podcast. I haven't listened to it in a few years. It's still in my library. I still download. Occasionally I'll look through the topics. If it's something I like, I'll listen to it. But religiously, when they published a new episode, I was refreshing to see it and consume it and to learn it. But the Real Estate Guys Radio, and they do conferences, and if you want to learn about real estate, it's an amazing one. But that was the one that really got me listening to podcasts, and it was co-hosted. So to your point, right, there was more conversation. It was going back between the two. They'd bring on guests, they'd talk about different things. So I love podcasts. I have found, as long as I've been listening to podcasts, there are still seasons of life where I'm super into them. I'm listening to them every second I get. And then I may get through a season of life. It could be 6 months where whatever, and I'm not listening to them like I was, right? So again, I don't know anyone listening, you listen to podcasts, what that's like for you, but I know for me, there are times when they're always there when I need them, right? Would you agree? I know you mentioned Gary Vee.
It's cool too, because the way that a podcast can keep up with current events or just today, for example, you brought up how to influence friends, or what is it? How to win friends and influence people. Yeah. Now they have how to influence in the digital age. And so you're having to come up with a whole new book to keep up with, like today, just a modern day. You can go back and do a podcast and say, okay, I'm Rusty Pruitt. I had this idea 1 month ago. I'm going back in to let you guys know that's changed. So it's really easy just to keep up with, what everyone's thinking. It's really cool.
Absolutely. We went through one where Mandy and I, my wife, we were listening to the podcast. I can't even remember what it was now, but it was more like a mystery suspense, like almost like a Dateline, NBC kind of thing. I forget the name of it, but we listened. We went down to Disney World, took our kids down to Disney World a few years ago, and we listened to it all the way down, all the way back. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, it made the time fly like that. But again, iterations where business, it's whatever, and then sometimes you need a break from business. You need a break from that, and you just want your mind to go in other non-professional areas, I guess, and just to let your mind free and not have to think and be mindless sometimes. But so I'm going to go through some of the podcasts I listen to. I'd love for some of our listeners, if you're listening to this, you have some podcasts that I did not mention that you think would be good for us to mention on this episode or to share with me. I would love to know. Message us. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We've rebranded. The name of our podcast is now The Journey, Navigating Pest Control in Business. So if you go to Pruitt Pest Journey, those are our handles for our social media platforms. We're going to be putting a website up soon. Maria's working on that. One of her rocks.
Exciting things. Yeah. And then you guys can even leave us a review and in the comments, share with us, like Rusty said, some of the podcasts you've been listening to.
For sure. So, all right. So in no particular order. So I'm going to go through some. There's some specifically pest control related that I'm going to touch on. And there's some that have nothing to do with pest control. Again, this is just what's in my library. Find them interesting, but I'm just starting here. So if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you can literally see my podcast library and
you do listen to a lot of podcasts.
I'm telling you, and some of them I haven't listened to in 2 years. At some point I may pick them back up, kind of like the real estate one I mentioned earlier. But so here's one that's really cool. Has nothing to do with pest control. It's called Business Wars. So Wondery, 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 they put out some different podcasts. I don't know much the story behind it. I just know they're really awesome. This one's called Business Wars. They take different things in the history of business. For example, there's a season that may have 7 episodes in it. And there was one like Coke versus Pepsi, right? Apple versus Microsoft, just all these different ones. Here's one right here. I'm listening to right now, Sotheby's versus Christie's, the auction. So it talks about how these different companies over the years and where they were competing against each other, and really, really cool. It's more the history and not necessarily personal development. I just find it interesting, really cool to see how businesses have built from nothing. There's one on, like, let's say Starbucks, and it talks about how they started here and how they moved up. And I always find that interesting of kind of what we're doing. We're documenting the journey of our pest control company. I really wish some of these companies had like a journal thing where you could go back and see the timeline of when things happen. So, but anyway, that's called Business Wars. Really, really cool. Another one by Wondery is called American Scandal. This is kind of interesting. There's a show on CNBC. I used to watch all the time. It recorded is called American Greed. It talks about these companies that started and maybe they rose to power, or individuals that rose to power and whatever they're in. And, basically they were crooks, or, there was one on like Bernie Madoff. There was one on, just different companies and whatnot. I always thought that was kind of an interesting show. But American Scandal is very similar to that. They're doing one right now that I'm listening to. It's called The Breakup of Big Oil, The Rise of Rockefeller. So John D. Rockefeller, there's a book, The Rockefeller Habits, I've read. So I'm kind of really intrigued by John D. Rockefeller, what he did back in the day. That's another episode. So Business Wars, really cool. American Scandal, same kind of thing. There's another one, Business Movers. All 3 of these so far are by Wondery. And look, I'll just go through the seasons. If it's something that looks cool, I'll listen to the whole series. The other things I just don't really necessarily have an interest on. Here's one, business mover. So these are talking about people in their industry that that were just game changers, right? Like Steve Jobs. This one right here was called Driving Chrysler Through Inflation. So this was about Chrysler back in the day, back in the 70s or 80s when interest rates went crazy and Chrysler was about to file bankruptcy. And, Lee Iacocca, sort of in the automotive world, is kind of a genius for turning companies around. Used to work at Ford. There's a whole season, I think, 7 or 8 episodes talking about Chrysler, about how they went from rock bottom to, their comeback.
Yeah.
Really pretty cool. Business movers, again, probably one of my favorite of the 3 I've mentioned. Let's see, there's one on Pixar. There's one again on Rockefeller, Beating Rockefeller. That's season 18. Really cool. The McDonald's invasion. They talked about, was it Ray Kroc that took McDonald's and, kind of got in, and how he moved it and franchised it and scaled it. Really cool. So that one's called Business Movers. And look, if you're driving, whatever, you can't, Maria, if you'll just make sure we write these down in the notes.
Oh yeah.
And organize them as best as we can. I know I'm all over the place, but so those are ones. Another one, the insurance guys. These guys, friends of mine, live here in Alabama. I was actually on one of their podcasts. I don't think it ever got published, so don't go try to find me and fact check me on that. But friends of mine, Brad and Scott, they're awesome. Again, nothing to do with pest control, insurance related. They started their podcast. They were a big inspiration for me starting this one, Maria. But they just started, the 2 of them, just talking about insurance and just having fun. They're good old boys. They're awesome, and they've really got a huge listenership for their podcast. It's called The Insurance Guys. Here's another one, non-industry related, the Gary V audio experience. Maria, you're a fan of this one. Why don't you tell us about who Gary V is and how you got connected with that? And I see a lot of people in a lot of different industries have this. So this is probably one of the top ones I would rank in my library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how real Gary V is. He may not be considered safe for work. So if you have kids in your car, he is explicit. A little explicit, but he's very, he's just raw. And he was one of the inspirations for my theme word this year, which is consistent. So he talks a lot about consistency, and I'm a perfectionist. And so if something's not perfect for me, I'm not going to post it. Well, that was my driving force for my theme word. He's just talks about how marketing is shifted and how you should be utilizing all of these platforms like TikTok and Twitch and all of these new things. But he helps keep me up to date, which is crazy because he's older than me. But I like his episodes. I don't like long episodes. Certain things can't hold my attention for that long. So it's good to just get in the car and play it on my way to work. But what length of an episode, like for you, do you like? Like sometimes if I'm on a road trip, I need 2 hours. So I know this is it's like a movie, but then I like the episodes are like 10 minutes long. There's no in between for me.
I think it's a matter of topic for me.
Yeah.
If it's something I'm really into, even if I need to hit pause, I'll come back to it. There are certain things that you listen to. You may listen to it one day, it has no meaning, it's boring to you. You can listen to the same thing 30 days later and something's changed in your world. And all of a sudden it's almost like that person speaking directly to you. I mean,
so you re-listen to episodes, like podcast episodes?
Well, just sometimes I just mean like I can read a book and tell you it's the best thing ever. You read it and you think it's boring, right? Because maybe I'm dealing with whatever the topic is. It just hits home to me. And you could read it 3 years from now. You could pick it back up and like, yeah, let me try it. He did say this, and it could have all this relevance to you. So for me, it's the topic. So Gary V audio experience. V is short for Gary Vaynerchuk. So again, he owns VaynerMedia. They do a little, I mean, he's an entrepreneur, has 1,000+ employees all over the world, marketing agency, all these different things. When it comes to PR, marketing, Gary V audio experience, amazing. Maria hit the nail on the head. He is very cutting edge with knowing where consumers' eyeballs are, where their ears
Mhm.
are, and being there, right?
Mhm.
So newspaper, radio, that was a really big thing at one point, right? And that's where all the eyeballs were. Well, maybe
Right.
that shifted. There may be a place for that. And he talks about that, where can I get the most bang for my buck with my marketing dollars? He talks about that incredible
I mean, he's
uh,
literally changed lives
podcast.
too. He helped me. He like what I like about his episodes is he'll have people on, just regular listeners. He'll have them on, and they're like, I want to get TikTok famous, for example. Okay, well, are you posting every day? And they're like, no. He's like, that's your problem.
Get
and,
out of
and
here.
so he really helped me just realize that it's uncomfortable. Nobody really likes. I personally don't like posting. I don't want the eyes on me, but yeah, no, he's literally changed lives. So if you're in marketing, I definitely recommend listening to Gary B.
Absolutely. And when we put these on the episode notes, we'll try to break these down, maybe industry, non-industry, because we're talking about a lot, and I know I'm throwing a lot out there. In leadership, that was one I've talked about in the past. 5, 6 years ago, I can't remember. I was determined to become a better leader, and I realized I was a good motivator, was not a good manager. I was not always the best leader, bar none. Admit it. Made a lot of mistakes. Still making a lot of mistakes, day in, day out. But I was determined to learn how to become a better leader. And what did I do? I started downloading books,
Mhm.
podcasts, started searching everything I could on leadership. That was my theme word for that year. So I'm going to talk about that just shortly. I've got 2 or 3 leadership podcasts in my library that I think are amazing. The very first one that I listened to that I could not put down, it was again so important to me, but it's Andy Stanley. So Andy Stanley has a leadership podcast. Okay. Um, it's gosh, I don't know how long it's been around. It's been around for a while. Go to your Apple, Spotify, and just Google Andy Stanley leadership, and it'll come up Andy Stanley leadership podcast. Amazing. I mean, simply amazing. So Andy he's a pastor of a North Point church, kind of a mega church with multiple campuses all over. It's not church related. It's about leadership, but he uses their organization a lot in examples of, different things that they've, gone through with growing and scaling their church, right? It's really no different than a business in the way they've done it. And I'm just looking through, and look, these are one of those that I haven't listened to his podcast, and it's been several months,
Mhm.
just because I've got 50 of them in my library, right? So I have to pick, but I'm looking at some. Here's some from 2015, lessons from the first 50 years. It talks about some of the most effective leadership principles that Andy had learned in the first 20 years of their organization. Confronting challenges. In this month's podcast, Andy interviews mentor Charlie Renfro about confronting challenges and maintaining trust in the workplace when things don't go as expected. So I encourage anybody wanting to develop leadership, download this podcast. I'm telling you, that's one of those, Maria, that I listen to, and I feel like all the episodes are like, it's like he's looking right at me. He's
Mhm.
looking at me, and I'm the only one in the room, and he's just preaching to me on this particular topic. Um, Absolutely amazing. Great podcast on leadership. Another one was Craig Rochelle. So he's another pastor. Um, just happens to be both of them happen to be pastors, but they're not necessarily talking about church stuff. They're talking about leadership skills. So Craig Groeschel, Groeshel, but it's the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast, because these guys are developing pastors in their churches and leadership
Mhm.
within their churches. I'm talking about several hundred, maybe thousands of employees that they employ. So they use a lot of these principles. So those 2 on leadership, absolutely recommend. They have study guides that you can download off their website that you can use in your leadership meetings with your teams. So those 2 when it comes to leadership. Okay. Now pest control. Let's talk a little pest control. We've talked about outside of the industry stuff that's in mine, and there are more, but those are some of the main ones. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He has a podcast I listened to in the past, but specifically talking about pest control. So when I first decided to get into pest control, if you look at my Google search history, You look at my podcast search history, it's like pest control, pest control, pest control. Everything I could to drink it in, right, to learn about it. And I came across some pest control podcasts. So I'm gonna go through some. I'm gonna start off with maybe the top 3 that I listen to pretty consistently. Again, not every one of them 100%, because a lot of them put out so much content. It's just hard to consume everything. These are no particular order, and there are also other ones that I have saved in my library. I just have not had an opportunity to start listening to for that same reason. Number 1, the Boardroom Buzz. So Paul and Patrick host the Boardroom Buzz. Paul is essentially a broker for representing primarily sellers for pest control owners that are selling or exiting. Super smart guy. He was one of the speakers down at Pest Daily's Power Conference that I went to last week in Tampa. Has an incredible perspective on the financial side and just generally speaking, a really good perspective of the industry. Patrick, his co-host, Patrick is awesome. Patrick Baldwin. I would say Patrick and I have become good friends, spent some time together last week down in Tampa. Patrick had a pest control company, has sold it, and now is starting a new company called Fraction. Doing bookkeeping and whatnot in the pest control industry. The Boardroom Buzz I love because it's not necessarily talking about this, not talking anything technical about killing bugs or that side of it. There are other great resources for that. This is talking about the state of the industry. It's talking about deals that are happening, the big players in the industry, movers and shakers. There are a lot of great interviews for high level, the CEO of Terminex, for Wayne's, the president, Sean Hollis, who we had on. So incredible, high level business kind of thing of what's going on. It's called the Boardroom Buzz. So that is definitely one of my top ones. Another one is the name has changed, but it's called Bug Bucks. Bug Bucks, BUX. So the Bug Bucks is hosted by Alan Draper and Eric Bassett. Both of which we've had on the podcast, right, Maria?
Mm-hmm.
I know you were super impressed with those guys when we've had that. I actually had Eric on twice, right?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the 3rd time. Hey, Rusty.
Yeah.
Let me pause this recording really fast and get my computer charger.
Okay. So yeah, Bug Bucks, Eric and Alan. So Alan first started this podcast. This was about the time when I came into the industry. So it was really good timing. It was called Start and Grow Your Pest Control Company. I mean, what perfect timing for us starting a pest control company when I found a podcast called Start and Grow Your Pest Control Company. Alan brings a lot of good perspective, different topics, from marketing to sales to growth, et cetera. I learned a ton in the very beginning listening to that. Third one, PMP Industry Insiders. So that's been a great one. Just for me, again, in trying to engulf myself within the pest control industry. Donnie Shelton, we've had him on as a guest. We've also had Dan on the podcast as a guest as well. But they started a podcast, a year or so ago. I can't remember the exact time, but they have really good conversations about what's going on in the industry, quarterly updates. They have great guests that they've interviewed, some of which we have or haven't. Just good way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, how to grow your business, really good content. So I would say those are the 3 that I'm able to kind of listen to. Like I mentioned, there's so many good ones out there. There are other ones. If you just go search pest control podcast, I'm sure there's probably a dozen that maybe have shown up since the last time I've searched and looked. But I know, let's see, other ones looking through here that I've got. We've got the Pest Life podcast. Again, I've downloaded it, just have not had an opportunity to really listen to it. It looks like their their content gets updated. I'm gonna try to reach out to some of these guys. Would love to have them on our show to talk about their podcast, how it can help. Let's see, another one, the PCIM podcast. I don't know if that doesn't look like that's been updated in a while. So again, some of these podcasts probably come and go. Let's see, what else do we have on here? The Author podcast. That's one I listened to early on. Knew the host, Brian Beard. I don't know Brian, but I hear really good things about him. Seems like a really good guy. That's one that's been in my library, haven't listened to in forever. Let's see, I'm sorry, Post. What's a Post? Do you know what a Post is?
I thought you said pasta. I was like, I'm hungry.
Maybe I'm hungry and thinking of pasta. The Pest Equity podcast. That's one. It was just updated last Friday. Again, I've listened to some of these here and there on my radar to try to pick up, listen to. And then the other one, the Pest Geek podcast. So I was listening to that very early on, had a lot of good technical information. It's been a while since I've listened to it. And again, this is nothing against any of these guys and their podcast. Again, for anybody listening, as you know, you have to prioritize your time. There's only so many hours in a day to invest in yourself in listening to an audiobook or podcast. And sometimes, you're so into one particular one that you're literally hitting refresh to see when they're putting content out, when their next episode's out. Others, I look up and it's been 12 months since I've listened to an episode, and I'll go back and look at some of the subjects and I'm like, holy cow, I've missed so many good ones. Right. So there's no guide to listening to podcasts.
No, sometimes I'll
I haven't come up
purposely,
with one.
I'll like, if I know I love a podcast and I'll find another podcast to listen to, I will intentionally like load up the bank. Like I have like 4 or 5 episodes that I know I can listen to like on a card, like a trip or something. I'm very sporadic when it comes to podcasts though. Like I'll go through these weird phases of only listening to them, no music. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of burnt out. But then you get to come back and you have a ton of episodes you can listen to.
No doubt.
Looks like you have a lot of like it sounds like you have a lot of episodes.
There's a lot. I need to go in and just kind of pare this stuff out. I mean, there's several in here. I'm just looking, I'm just scrolling through looking that I don't listen to, or I've never even listened to. Maybe, I'll have someone say, Rusty, have you heard of the so-and-so podcast? Here's one, Real AF. You can do the math there with Andy Frisella. I've never listened to it, but someone who I highly respect, he showed it to me and said, hey, you need to check this out. I just haven't had an opportunity to listen to it. Right. Here's another one, The School of Greatness. A friend of mine, Ben Chambliss, referred that to me by Lewis Howes. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but best-selling author. It's one of those that I added it to my library, just haven't had a chance to go through and listen to it. So I think some of the takeaways, there's really no excuse on not to develop a skill these days, it seems, right? I think we're all taught, go to college, get your degree, get your master's, whatever it is, to learn that specific skill. And obviously you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
My friend that's a dentist, he's not going to learn how to practice dentistry by listening to a podcast. But I guarantee you, if you search right now, dentist podcast, there's probably one with a dentist consultant or guru who has talked about how to grow your dental practice.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things we've learned. We talked about in one of the beginning episodes. Remember the one we did about finding mentors?
Yeah.
How do you find mentors? And coming outside of the industry, that's what I did. Reach out to meet mentors, pick their brains, ask a lot of questions, learn from them. But this is the other, just listening to podcasts on these different subjects.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a game changer. I know for me in development and just my education. I didn't get an MBA. I didn't get a doctorate, but this is sort of my MBA,
Right.
How to learn and develop these skills. So,
how awesome is it that, like, to your point, you could search anything on Apple Podcasts, and whatever you're interested in or whatever your field is, you're going to find a podcast episode. My favorite podcasts actually are just lifestyle podcasts. I've found a lot of girls just in their 20s, new in their career, and it's so interesting just following someone's journey and listening to what's going on in their lives. And sometimes they get personal with it. They're like, yes, I was talking to so and so last week, maybe a boy, and then the next week they're like, that's over. It's like keeping up with someone. It really is. So I love it.
Well, that's what I find interesting about, to your point, the ones that are hosting these podcasts that are real, and they're, it's one thing to come on here and you talk about how our company's growing and here's what we're doing and all this stuff. And the reality is, man, it's hard. You skin your knees, you have to get up, you have tough conversations with employees. We've had to, part ways with 2 different employees in the last, couple months. And that's hard, man. That's not easy. Nobody likes that, but it's real. If we just talked about how great our company is and how we're adding all these awesome people, but at the end of the day, that's one of your biggest challenges is hiring good people, retaining them, making sure they're sitting in the right seat. Make sure you got right people on the bus. So those are challenges. And, I encourage, anybody listening to this, reach out to us if there's anything we've talked about that we can help with. And I promise you we can return the favor, because I promise there's something that you're doing that we can learn from, no doubt. But these are some of the podcasts in my library, for whatever it's worth. We thought it'd be cool to kind of go through and talk about it. So I'm just going to go through one more time, again, within pest control. Again, some of these that I did not give descriptions on, I'm sure they're awesome. I just have not had the opportunity to listen to them. But Boardroom Buzz, Bug Bucks, PMP Insiders, again, those are the ones that I am constantly looking at. What are the topics that they're talking on? I get a ton of value in. Other outside of the industry, the Wondery stuff, Business Movers. It's incredible. Love that. They talk about these game-changing industry leaders. Business Wars, again, right up there with it. The Business Wars podcast, talking about the different companies and how they fought against each other over the years and how they came out of that. Very, very interesting. And then lastly, the leadership. So Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle, if you're looking to learn leadership skills, looking to learn better ways to lead your team, how to be a better leader, on a scale of 1 to 10, I still may rank myself a 3. I mean, I'm still just trying to get above 5. So I'm constantly trying to learn from that. With 2 incredible podcasts there on leadership. I encourage you to check them out. Wrapping up, Maria, just share one more time. How can people message us? How can they find us? Maybe instructions on how to leave a review right now on Apple and Spotify.
Yes, you can leave reviews directly through both of the apps. I believe it's at the bottom of the podcast episode. You just click on the 5 stars. Hopefully you rate us 5 stars, and then you can leave comments. We're also available on all social media platforms. Our handle is the Pruitt Pest Journey. And then in the next couple of days, we are actually launching a landing page for everybody to kind of see all of our content in one place. So super excited about that. What else? YouTube.
Yeah, there you go. Maria has us everywhere. So, hey guys, appreciate you listening. Thanks for your time. Send us any feedback. We'd love to give as much value as we can any way you feel like we can. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk soon.
Bye.